pulped the fruit, skin and pulping. What do you find in that? So they did plates of all these phases, 24 hours, 48 hours, to see what was in that fermentation. And here, still you do have a dominance of your Saccharomyces cerevisiae and Baianus. Saccharomyces is still quite dominant within that process. And we do have many other strains that are existent, but in lesser quantities or even still in higher quantities as well. So that just, in a way, tells you how complex the fermentation is, especially in coffee, which is not it's not a sterile environment. So you're going to have a lot of these microorganisms floating. But at the end of the day, what is critical is to, at the beginning, check what you're starting, and then at the end also confirm that what you have at the end is what you put in, and that's most likely the strain that has done that fermentation. This is just also to confirm that Saccharomyces cerevisiae, amongst others, is one of those strains that are still, in your fermentation when you ferment. The other strains are there, but from a production point of view, I laugh because our production managers, when you give them a strain that is not a Saccharomyces cerevisiae, they either hate you or they like you, but most of the time they hate you because you are giving them headaches, and it's difficult to produce, and there are certain stringent requirements. Even if it's a non-Saccharomyces, it still needs to have certain population for us to say it's the one that is going to take control of that fermentation. So if it's below a certain spec, then we cannot sell it, and if you can't dry it, then it's difficult. Then they spend a lot of energy, money, their costs go up because they are producing this very special strain that Margaret has brought and said, the coffee people would love to have this and it will be amazing. So we push, if you're a salesperson, you want that, yes, you say, yeah, it will make money, but then the production guy is saying, I want the baking yeast because it's the easiest for me to produce and it's one strain and it's easy. So anyway, that's just the dynamics we have in our organization for your info. So again, here you've got different coffee samples where you are, showing the yeast, that you've got yeast, bacteria, and fungi also during your fermentation. But the yeast, which is this one, it is still quite dominant within that fermentation. So there is also, one could look at bacteria and the influence of bacteria on, which is positive influence and negative influence on your quality as well, that exists. So, but today we are concentrating on yeast. Bacteria is another ball game, altogether more complicated than yeast from a production and handling point of view, but they do have an influence. So, let's talk about indigenous fermentation, which is really the natural fermentations that we do on a day-to-day basis. They exist, they are good, they could also not work well, but it doesn't mean that, what the industry is doing is wrong. It's great because we do have some really interesting cups that come out every year that we go, wow, and it's 90, points, and it's amazing, and you just want to have more of that. And then next year, the same farmer tries again, and they do the same thing, and they just don't get there. And sometimes it's like, so what happened? I did everything that I could possibly do. So the other possible reasons why it doesn't get to that point is because that year, depending on the conditions that existed in that season, you had certain microorganisms that were dominant, and in the next season, with our climate change, you're going to have different ones being more active at the time that you harvest. So that really can have an impact on your quality, because if you're going to have the bad guys existing more at the time that you're fermenting, they're probably going to have more impact on your coffee than if they were the good guys. So good, we do have, we can have amazing stuff, but we don't know. So from our side, we're coming in and saying, okay, that's all great, but I think there's a potential of you at least reducing that variation, you know, where you have year to year times that you get great and then you go down. So maybe you want to reduce that variation to have a small variation, which would be great, because then you know what to expect. Your customers know what to expect because they capped it last year, they loved it. You know, you as the buyers, you want to know, you know, okay, next year if I get again from the same producer, I'm going to get more or less the same quality. That is what we're looking for. And this is what, when you go to a yeast fermentation inoculation, this is something that can assist with that. Yes. Spoken about, so sometimes people want to talk about indigenous versus Quail Eggs, and really I've mentioned that it doesn't mean that if it's indigenous it's spoiled, not at all, but you can have spoilage within an indigenous fermentation, and that's where, you know, you can get some funky great wines without spoilage, and you can get some unique cuppings, which is amazing. But when you get spoilage, it can really also be big, where you get those phenolic flavors or stinkers and what have you, and those can also come from microbial contamination. So what type of microorganisms exist in coffee? You've got everything. You've got your molds, you've got your yeast, you've got your acetic acid bacteria, lactic acid bacteria. So they are all playing in there, and at the end of the day, they're all influencing your coffee, you know, quality at the end of the day. So what are the benefits of controlling your fermentation? From where we're coming from, you can reduce the deviation. So you're managing your deviation risks, which is what I've just spoken about. And then time management as well. We've noticed that with inoculation, you can speed up your demucilagination process, and also to a certain extent, because everything is cleaned faster, you can then proceed to drying beds, and also the drying process can be a bit quicker as well. This was picked up, I think, from a dry process processing rather than the wet processing. They found that when they applied yeast, they could get a faster drying process by a couple of days, about 8 days. And I think it's really to do with the fact that every yeast has got some enzyme activity, and probably when you spray it on that cherry, the yeast are going to, obviously the enzymes break into the cells as they look for the food, and by doing that, you're disrupting the cell wall and letting the water out, and I think that's, you know, so it's a faster process than when it's just natural. And biocontrol, so you are controlling what is fermenting, so you are really taking out the bad guys. They are there, but you're making them ineffective by overcrowding them with the good guys. And quality management, there is flavor influence, or because of their metabolism, each yeast has got different abilities to either release certain flavors or convert. So that's why you will see some yeasts will either be aromatic yeast and some will not. So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for something totally different, you can have something really out of this world. However, something different is not always what your customer is looking for. Maybe it moves away from the profile that you're used to. That will happen. So it's up to, you know, it's a tool that a farmer has that they can play with, and they can also, at the end of the day, potentially have different lots that they can blend and come up with different, you know, depending on what profiles they are looking for, especially when you're looking at that top range, the specialties, you know, space. And, or even if you're looking at, okay, the mass production, you're looking at consistency as well. So just having a consistent quality would be great from year to year. And what we've also picked up is that we get a reduction in water usage by about 25% in a washed process, which is really big in terms of, you know, now with water problems, you know, and sustainability and all. And if you come from Cape Town like I do, we are threatened by, or we almost had a day zero and that is not a nice picture to think of, where you totally run out of water because our dams were so low. With climate change, we hadn't had enough water in 100 years. So that year, which is last year, which has just come to an end now, thankfully this year we've got some water. So that is important to save water. I think it's really, really critical to save water every time. Anyway, so how do we select yeast? So we really start from, studying the microorganism that we want. So we find it in nature, and then we select the desired ones. We then test them in the lab, then we grow them. If we are happy with them, then we upscale the production. So just some examples of trials we've done and some results. From a demiscegenation, if you look at the impact of selected yeast on pH, you see that these are all different strains that were put in this fermentation. This is the control without addition of yeast, and really it speeds up. So this confirms the speeding up of your demiscegenation process, which is confirmed by all these results with the lowering of your pH. And there are certain compounds that are really not impacted by adding yeast, and some of these, caffeine is not going to change it, no matter how, these are different strains that we've put in, and with the control, so you don't see much variation on these. These are fatty acids and even sugar, so there's not much difference. It's more about the next slide, which is really the different flavors that you get, aroma compounds that you get. So there you start seeing differences with the different yeast that you're applying. And on the esters as well, some are very aromatic, so you're looking at those tropical fruits, you're looking at those different mango, banana, or whatever fruits. There, the